I purchased something by mistake and it turned out to be one of the most enjoyable painting experiences that I've had lately. So I'm going to tell you what this is, why I think it's amazing for watercolor painting, and how I used it to create a beautiful art piece. I'm a big fan of the Derwent products, especially their water-soluble pencils. That's why I decided I was going to try the Inktense pan set this time. So I've placed my order, and when I received it, I realized that I had made a mistake. I had purchased the Derwent Graphitint pan set instead. It could have been a disaster, but in fact I quickly saw the potential for these paints and I got to work. When I went for the Inktense pan set, it was to paint something that was going to be vibrant and colorful, and in that sense, to use the Derwent Graphitint pan set instead was going to be very different because there are graphite particles in them, and that can easily give a painting a moody flavor with muted tones, as you can see from the swatches that I made here. And I imagine that muted colors is not everyone's jam, but I personally love it. It really fits my style. I think these colors look amazing, and just swatching these paints itself was enjoyable. I had absolutely no trouble activating the paint, even though these half pans were brand new, and they were easy to paint with on paper with rich and deep muted tones. And at the same time, there's a nice variety of colors in there, some of which are bright enough to help bring a moody painting to life. And on the Derwent's website, it says that these paints are a unique blend of graphite with a hint of color. The term watercolor doesn't appear anywhere. So even though the set himself looks like a watercolor set, it looks like there's a strong distinction to make between the two. And if, by the way, you know anything about the exact composition of these Graphitint paint, please let me know in the comments down below. I did find some websites labeling these as watercolor paints with graphite particles, but I still wish that the brands themselves were more specific about what their products are made of, because oftentimes whether it is Derwent, Caran d'Ache or any other brand, it's not very clear. But you know what? I'm not a fan of diving into specifics that much because I only paint for fun and practice, not to sell my art. So I think that the best way is always going to be to try the paints, see how it feels to paint with them and what it looks like. And you'll see I have some interesting things to share here. So I started with the first layer on the moody Scottish Highlands landscape. I found a photo online and it was too beautiful not to paint. And right away you can see how beautifully the green paint moves on paper. It's a bit muted yet vibrant at the same time, so that was a great start. You can see as I started working on the sky that I got a few paint bubbles forming. I see these frequently with the Inktense and my watercolor pencils as well, of all brands, and that is not a bad thing for the final outcome, as you'll see. But it indicates that the composition is just very different from traditional watercolors. The paint moves very well on paper, but it doesn't feel as light as watercolor in a way. And that's also visible here in the mountains, where I had those small spots of paint showing in the places that I had tapped the brush in. But again, that wasn't anything new for me, and I know that it doesn't hinder the painting process or the painting itself in the end, so I just kept going, and at this point, I felt pleased by the looks of the paints and the experience was relaxing and fun, and it even gave me the urge to go paint an entire sketchbook with just these paints if only I had a lot of time on my hands. I started including purples. There are two of them in the set. One is light and the other much darker. And even though I used a lot of different colors here, they still looked great together without me having to mix them to each other, which I feel is not always the case with a traditional watercolor set. But here, it really seems like I could pick any color combo from the set and it's always gonna work. Maybe the graphite particles also help tie in those colors together, and they probably create an instant sense of harmony in the painting. If you're curious about how I paint in this way, you might consider joining my Patreon for a small monthly fee. I just shared the entire process for this painting there, and there are many other watercolor and water-soluble pencil painting tutorials available. I'll link the index for all of them in the description of the video. And if you're entirely new to painting, you feel like you need to learn everything and start with something easy, I'm working on a landscape mini workshop that I'm gonna release within the next 2 to 3 weeks. It's gonna have everything that a beginner needs to know all in one place to get started with the best experience possible and the best results. So stay tuned because I'll be sharing more very soon. Just like I would with traditional watercolors, nothing different in the process so far, you can see that I applied a second layer to intensify the colors in places and also deepen the shadows and build up contrast. I could see some very subtle shimmer from the graphite particles. They seem heavier than the rest of the paint and it shows when you use them, even though it might not be as visible on video. And the effect so far was very beautiful and discreet at the same time. And I'll show you later in the video how these look in the final painting and in the sunlight. That's where it shows best. With odd or cheap watercolor related supplies, sometimes you'll find that it's hard to layer on top of a base layer. But here it was just like my normal supplies, and for me it's a huge indicator that I'm working with something that is good quality. I noticed after the second layer, however, that one of the bubbles on the sky had not melted into the rest of the painting. They usually do with these non-traditional watercolor mediums. So I simply wet the sheet again to smooth it out, and like magic, in a few seconds it disappeared. And I love this trick because it's the kind of thing that does wonders, but you wouldn't even know that I've done that if I didn't tell you. I started working on adding detail on dry this time, and I noticed that unlike watercolors, these paints dry a bit faster. So as soon as I noticed, I was careful to soften the hard edges quickly. And you see how I was able to work with these supplies very easily. When they're good ones, even if they don't act like your usual supplies, you'll always find ways and techniques to work with them, and the outcome and the process will be as great as what you're used to. As always, it's mostly just a matter of knowing your supplies. I really liked that it was easy to make some of the colors lighter and transparent by adding water, but also make them very opaque where I needed them to be. And the overall painting experience here was fun and it pumped me up for more, so I do not regret purchasing this small set. I told you I was going to show you the shimmers in sunlight, and here they are. Look at how beautiful it is. If there's a supply that you would like me to try out on this channel, please let me know in the comments. And in the meantime, I'll link here one of my Inktense pencils videos so you can see how these act and how I use them to create artworks that look just like watercolors. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.